Why do you think people start to overcomplicate things?
Boredom and fear, right? There's a fear that the reason why you didn't succeed in one door is because you didn't make the right mouth sounds. And the second one is just boredom. And you'll hear this a lot. They're like, well, I don't want to just keep saying the same pitch. As if every customer overheard the last conversation you just had.
What's up, guys? This is Sam Taggart, your host of the DDD podcast. And we're sitting here in studio, and I've got a super awesome guest today. But before we dive in, we got a lot of things happening depending on when this is coming out. If you've gotten your pro certification in DDD University, make sure to go schedule your sales boot camp. So we have boot camps coming up all over, and one in Florida next week, one in Vegas and Utah coming up. So if you are wanting to get certified, go through the content, take the test, call us. We'll get you on the calendar. DDD University has been entirely revamped. Even if you've watched it maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever, go check it out. And a couple things happening. SolarCon, come say hi. April, what is it, Carlos? 17th, 16th, 17th? Middle of April, Vegas, come hang. You've got Win the Storm happening here soon. So just come hang at one of the trade shows if you're around. But today we have a solar legend. So we got a super special guest, Carlos Morales, El Señor himself. He is the founder of Pacific, one of the co-founders of Pacific United Power. They're doing awesome blitzes all over the country. And then also probably more commonly known for his YouTube channel, Real Sales Dynamics. And, he's been a speaker. He's created a lot of content, and I get entertained watching some of the YouTube videos. So if you haven't checked those guys out, go hit subscribe. But I guess, Carlos, when did you really start in solar? You've done solar for a long time. Did you do other things door to door prior to this?
Yeah, I've been solar for about 8 years. My initial manager was a buddy of yours, Ashton Buswell.
Oh, right on. Started with Legacy.
Yeah, started with Legacy Power, big box solar company. Prior to that, I was a mortgage broker for about a year. And before all that stuff, I actually got my master's in social work. So completely different background than some of the other folks out here. Was a child protective services investigator. That was my first door knocking job. So I used to go to people's homes, knock their house in order to pull out their kid. And so when people kind of complain that they get yelled down the door, I'm just thinking, I had a 7-year-old pull a gun on me in Texas. So, everything is kind of a light load when that's your background, right?
Yes.
And I'm incredibly thankful to now be in sunny Florida, of all places, which I never expected to move to. But you kind of move where the work goes, and Florida seems to be the best place over the course of the last couple of years.
I love that. So let's just dive in. Obviously been super successful in the solar space. You guys did 130 on a blitz. A lot of people do these blitzes now. And, obviously 8 years ago when you were in solar, that was not probably a real thing. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, I remember, I was in solar, 8, 9 years ago. And it was like such a long process to sell a deal even, back then. It was like, just to do a change order, it took you 24 hours to move your proposal. You know what I mean? Let's walk through a couple successful tips of how to run a blitz in this podcast, and maybe just why you created some YouTube videos and how that's maybe helped you in the recruiting game, or how do you balance kind of a personal, brand and running company. You know what I mean? I actually have a lot of cool questions that'll be pretty relevant. So if you're listening, that's kind of where I'm going to take this thread. But before we go there, obviously background and master's degree. What did mom and dad say when you're like, hey, I'm going to go do door-to-door sales after getting a master's degree? And what was the flack and the internal and external debate and dilemma that you may have had to go through?
Yeah. So my background, both my parents are Puerto Rican. There's some Jewish something in there at some point. My dad's a physician, right? Established pillar of the community. in my case, when I went to go get my social work master's, the reason why I jumped into that was, when you're young, like early 20s, you don't pay a lot of attention to what's going on around you. You spend a lot more time focusing on what's going on externally, trying to change the world. And that's what I was going to school for, to try to change the world and help people out when it comes to dealing with kids. I learned a lot from that experience. I ended up writing a book about working for Child Protective Services. It was called Legally Kidnapped. The book ended up doing remarkably well, but the book kind of hit a core thing to the point where it did so well, and I stated such bad things about the agency that I was working for, it kind of eliminated my ability to work within social work anymore. And once you get out of that and you basically lit your master's degree on fire, as everyone knows, in sales, they don't really care about your background. So I tried a couple different sales gigs. The reason I ended up in mortgages was because I watched the movie The Big Short and thought, that seems like a good gig. And funny enough, my manager at the time, older woman, not a nice person, but she's, a hustler. But she told me her son was making 3 times more than her selling solar door to door for Vivint at the time in Cali. And that's all I needed to hear, right? I was 29 and I put in my 2 weeks notice. I was going to be part of the President's Club, get flown out to Hawaii. I was like, I'm good. I don't really want to hang out with you guys anymore. And when I got into door knocking, I talked to my parents about it. My dad's like, you make a lot of money? Good, go do it. Great. The mom's skeptical. It was fun though, because when I jumped in, the only older guy there was Ashton Buswell. Everyone else was, 20 to 23 years old. A lot of those guys ended up starting what became Sunder later on. And what I decided to be was I wanted to be as humble as possible, right? Just learn from all these people, right? Don't come into it thinking I know better than you, which is usually the problem with guys who get into door knocking a little bit later in their life. Yeah. And just remaining coachable. And I'll tell you, man, my first 2 months, I stunk. I was not great. My pitch was overly complex. I was listening to everyone's pitches and trying to make some Frankenstein pitch. It's always the funniest thing in door knocking, right? You have no history in it, but you think, I'm going to come up with the greatest pitch that's ever been heard. Yep. My mentor ended up scratching up a bunch of my pitch. It was actually Michael Goochman, who's now VP over at Sunder. And I just realized I need to simplify and execute, right? And that's been the cornerstone of everything I've ever done since then. Simplify and execute. My 3rd month in, I ended up doing 29 sales in a month. Wow. Right. And then once I hit that and I got this huge rise in confidence, out of nowhere, I had all these people who were looking towards me for guidance. And I just thought, I don't want to let them down. And so just like how they talk about in war, people aren't really fighting for their country, they're fighting for their guys to the left and the right. In my head, it wasn't really about anyone else except the group that I was with and trying to help those people perform at the highest level possible. And so simplify, execute. And that's how I was able to kind of get the channel going, get these blitzes going, and getting everything else going.
I think you said it so simply, but I think anybody listening to this, you guys realize that I would say 70, 80% of people are still Frankensteining their pitch. It's like, wait a minute. And the uncoachability of the individual has everything to do with their lack of performance. And it's like watching these people in an industry where it's like you can do 30, 40 in a month and they're doing 2 to 3 in a month and they're sitting there complaining. They're sitting there going, how do I do that? Why am I not performing? And they're, maybe watching videos and they're maybe sitting there being like, yeah, I've been doing this for 3 years. And it's like, then why are you still doing 3 a month? It's like, you're Frankensteining 3 years in still and never drop the ego, where you luckily learned that at a very young age, not age, but let's say age in the industry, that I think perpetuated your success. And if more people took that upon themselves of studying and saying, okay, word for word, let me just say it how you say it. I'll drop the, you know what I mean? How many more deals would guys be selling?
And that humble thing is really important, right? Because when it comes to dealing with reps, and this, you train this, reps have basically 2 skill sets that matter, right? There's the education level, right? What do they know about the industry, how it works and everything else? And then there's a work activity, right? And if someone has a 10 work activity and a 2 on the education level, I'll take that over the opposite any single day, right? Because I can train, I can get as simple pitch as possible. I can stick them in specific types of communities that it's not going to really matter how good your pitch is. It just matters how many doors you knock and you finally find someone that's willing to give you a bill or whatever. But if someone is prideful, which is the creation of all sin, right? Like the worst possible sin is pride. Everything else comes from that. If someone's really prideful, they're just going to fail. And they're not going to take any agency in their failure. They're going to believe that everyone is succeeding more to them. It's because they stole or they lied or they did something wrong. And that the only true way to sell involves maybe only selling 1 or 2 deals a month. And I know both of us see that in our YouTube comments on a pretty consistent basis. So get
true.
out of that mindset.
So true. So fast forward, what was like the catalyst for you to be like, all right, I'm just going to start my own solar company? And yeah, like what triggered that?
So at Legacy, I did really well. I ended up becoming manager of the year. I think it was probably about 4 or 5 years in. It's always difficult time. And at that same time, we were running into a couple of issues with installers that we were working with. And I didn't want to remain humble anymore. I basically got to the position where I was like, we have like 6 different managers in our office. I think we might have another way out, right? Another route towards victory with this. And I had just met the guys who started what became Real Sales Dynamics. Mm-hmm. And so we were trying to come up with a couple of different ideas between myself and another guy that I think has been on your show, Johnny Graham.
Yeah, Johnny. Yeah.
And we headed out. And I don't need to get into a bunch of details that happens whenever you leave a big box solar company. I'm going to tell you right now, they're not super nice about it. And we picked up 1 installer, then picked up 2 installers. We did pretty well in California, where I'd been selling the entire time. The bigger transition, though, for me was moving out of state and selling in completely different territory, right? I saw net metering going away in California. And I just came to the thought, like, what if I try to conquer a different territory, right? Before I was in door-to-door sales, I don't think I'd really kept a job for longer than 1.5 years. Now I've been in this for years. So for me, it's always trying to find a new challenge to try to conquer. And Florida for me was that challenge. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy when I came out here. I knew basically no one. All right. I brought my camera guy, and my fiance became my wife, and one other fella who didn't quite work out as far as door knocking is concerned. And thankfully, because of, YouTube, the Real Sales Dynamics channel, we just started putting out content, video after video every single week until we got a good amount of people who wanted to come work for us. For me, though, I didn't hire anyone in Florida until about 2 months in, just to make sure I could understand the market. And boy, is Florida a lot different than California. I mean, you assume when you come out here that you're going to meet, that every installer is just going to be as competent as a bright planet, right? They're not. A lot of them are these mom and pop shop companies who are teetering on bankruptcy every single week. They don't even know how to pull permits half the time. So you have to do a lot of vetting. We ended up going through, I think, 4 installers just in our first year. And once we started picking up a bit of momentum, I ended up visiting a buddy for a blitz out in Texas. I saw what they were doing, and I just thought, what, this is the way forward. And so since then, for the last about 9 months or so, it's just been super high blitz volume, whether Sunnova pays us or not,
Love that. No, that's been a hiccup for sure. And anybody that's listening that's in the solar that's been impacted by Sunnova, heart goes out to you. It's like a lot of people are like, it's only me. I'm like, no, it's not only you. And I think that's something to be extremely open about that maybe isn't talked a lot about, because it's like a rep might just be like, man, my company's not paying me. I'm like, guess what? The banks aren't paying all of the companies, and they're feeling it much more than you are feeling it as an individual sales rep. Trust me. So heart goes out to everybody who's been affected by that, which is really, really frustrating. So let's talk about this blitz concept. 9 months ago, you're like, all right, this is the future. Why a blitz though? Like what did you see in a blitz that made that different than maybe your past 7 years doing it?
Well, to be fair, I was actually trying to mimic something that I experienced over at Legacy. They had this thing called Legacy Masters. And every single time a competition would come up, I wanted to win it no matter what, right? Some of the reps called Ashton Buswell the Tom Brady of solar when I got into the industry. And you can ask Ashton, I wanted to compete with him every single month, like as soon as they started doing well. So I wanted to create that competitive energy. Also, reps, especially door knocking, they've known this for years, but they work better in a sprint than an endurance run, right? Especially for long, little sets of time, say 10 days or 14 days at a time. And one of the difficulties, especially when you're a smaller company, is motivating guys to go out there when you only have a small unit of people that you're not necessarily competing with across the country, right? Which is what you have with things like Masters. You have this huge amount of infrastructure, money that was built up on weird payouts with Sunrun over the course of a couple of years, right? So you have all that liquidity. We don't. So we have to create that competitive niche, that tribalism within our group. So human beings, and men particularly, for eons have been going to new communities and conquering those areas. So if you can take that vibe without all the violence and pillaging, right? Instead, you're going out there to conquer by putting panels on a bunch of roofs. You can get guys to level up in ways that are unexpected. The mistake people make, though, is they'll see this and go, oh, well, I'll just go grab a bunch of dudes and we'll just go out to some random town and we're going to kill it. Organization's really key. So, and I can go into this a bit here, but one of the things that you need to focus on when you're going to run a blitz is, what is your actual goal? Everyone's just going to say make a lot of money, but it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. Are you focusing on kilowatts or on sales, right? If you're focusing on kilowatts, okay, you're going to go probably out towards more farm-based knocking, right? If you're going to be farm-based knocking, that means almost every single rep's going to need to have their own car. Did you plan for that? No? Okay. When are you going to have sales meetings? Are you going to have them in the morning and the evening? Or are you going to have no sales meetings? Or are you just going to expect people to wake up and be motivated to work every single day just like you? They're probably not, right? And when you're doing that bit of research initially, the more market research you can do prior to your blitz, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, I remember. I remember I ran a blitz one time to South Carolina, and I didn't realize that you had to get the HOA, not the HOA docs, the insurance documents in South Carolina. Like, you have to actually get a copy of their insurance. And you're like, so we blitz, and then I have to call every customer from Utah that we sold and like try to collect insurance docs. So it was like 60 customers, and I think we lost like 20 something deals just because it's like we couldn't chase down the insurance documents. It's like, what a dumb thing that we would have never known. Or like you start in a net metering where it's like you're in a co-op or something that doesn't allow it because you're in some little town, and you're like, oh, if I would have gone 3 blocks over, I would have been in the right. I just seen a lot of that stuff. And that organization costs you 3 days. It costs you 20 deals. It costs you, time and frustration, because it's like that rep might be his one deal he got on the blitz, and it's like, sorry, bro, it didn't have net metering. And it's like, oh, you look like the idiot. So guys, organization's key. And whether you're doing solar or not, I know a lot of fiber people, pest control. We did alarm blitzes for years. This isn't just exclusive to fiber or solar. I watch roofers and I'm like, why would not roofers do more of this if you're listening to this? Like, it's like catch on, you know what I mean? They storm chase, but then I'm like, why don't you blitz just periodically? Like, I don't know. I just go through this and I'm like, it's a very cool, conscious way, like you just said, of creating a sprint that you'll get more out of things. So what other things? Keep going. Yeah.
You do your market research, right? Like, so for Florida, for instance, when I wanted closers, there's all these closers across the country who hit me up, right? So for those of you who don't know, on Instagram, it's the Wolf of Solar. You've probably seen an ad with me in it. talking about doing a blitz. And yes, I'd run an ad campaign regarding it because we're trying to get in, for every 4 applicants we get, we usually take about 1 because we have specific requirements. And one of the requirements is when you come out for your first blitz, specifically if you've never sold in Florida before, you're not closing for the exact reason you just literally brought up. We have to get insurance declaration forms, power of attorney in certain cases, right? We're doing our own site inspections for all of our own closes. And just the way that you go about pitching these people is a little bit slower, a little bit more stern than in other markets. So you might find a lot of success doing the way you're doing it in California. I can't tell you, though, how many guys from California have just bageled out in Florida because they're trying all the same tactics, right? So when guys come out, they're setters initially. Now, what's important to keep in mind as well, especially if you're running your own, is letting the installation company know what's going to happen, right? So we did one blitz where we had site techs. So I helped cover the housing for the site tech to literally just stay there in this tiny town for the full 10 days, right? And the upfront capital you're going to spend if you don't do this market research is going to go all away forever if you don't do it right? Because these things can get very expensive, especially when you're doing it on the level that I am, where we have 40 reps coming out for 10 to 11 days. That's a lot of Airbnbs or hotels to be paying for upfront.
100%. So let's shift gears a little bit, because guys, and if you're listening to this, if you've never considered a blitz, I promise you it's just way fun, because running a marathon year round, doing the same thing is just monotonous. So having a little mix up, I highly recommend it. And number 2, so you do this YouTube channel, Real Sales Dynamics, and teaching kind of the in-person, showing kind of the behind the scenes. Where do you see in sales training? I watch a lot of sales. I do a lot of sales training. When you go train salespeople, obviously you get these 40 guys come out, you run your meetings. Where do you feel like the biggest mistake when it comes to a door-to-door sales rep, as far as they think they're trained and or they may be mistrained? Where do you see sales reps, if they were just to do XYZ in sales training, you would see the biggest pop in performance?
Great question. So I'll answer on twofold. One is I'm going to admit to a mistake that I've made multiple times early on in training, which is getting way too complicated and getting way too the weeds, right? When you get into that theoretical, I remember reading the book Pitch Anything. I was like, this is a life-changing book. Oren Klaff is brilliant. He's getting into the reptilian portion of your brain, all this complicated stuff. And then I give that to an 18-year-old rep, and he's like, I have no idea how to use any of this. Good point. So now I recommend to people first read Door to Door Millionaire, then Jordan Belfort's Way of the Wolf, then read Pitch Anything. Then it kind of makes sense, right? There's a list of things. One leads to the next, leads to the next. Secondly is getting guys to memorize too long of a script, right? Assuming that the person on the other end, the trainee, is going to be able to speak those exact words in as strong a way as you did, the person who initially came up with all of it, right? You'll see guys stating a pitch, and I'll just ask, what do any of those words mean? Just explain it to me, because there's no story here. I don't know what any aspect of the story is that you're pitching to me. Humans are story driven. The first thing we want to hear when we're babies is a story. So when we're pitching, we should be telling a story while we're doing it. And if you can't explain that back to your reps, and those reps can't explain it to a customer, they're not going to have a very good time. They're going to fail, right? And when it comes to responding to things like objections, last year I won the objections challenge over at SolarCon. All I did the whole time was just go, acknowledge, associate, ask. That was it. I acknowledge, I totally understand what you're saying. 90% of people believe X, Y, and Z. Quick question, why are you asking that? That's the response to every single objection. So if you can break down, again, simplify, and then execute on every level, you're going to do a much better job of getting people to mirror your success.
Mm. So good, guys. So good. And where do you feel like why do you think people start to overcomplicate things? Like why? Like it's so funny. Adam Shantz, I'd say, is probably the best door knocker I've ever seen. And his door pitch literally is, hey, I'm in charge of the security in the area. This is my license with the city. You want me to take my shoes on or off? Like that's his pitch. Like no more. And I'm just like, wow, that is the most basic, simple, assertive pitch. But like, is it nerves? Is it they're trying to be creative? Is it, why overcomplicate?
Boredom and fear. Right? There's the fear that the reason why you didn't succeed in one door is because you didn't make the right mouth sounds. And the second one is just boredom. And you'll hear this a lot. They're like, well, I don't want to just keep saying the same pitch. As if every customer overheard the last conversation you just had. Right? If you can just memorize a couple key things and key rules, you're going to use a lot less energy when you're pitching, which means you're going to have more energy when you need it. Like if you're in a difficult close with an old Cuban family in Florida, you're going to have to go in, right? They're going to come out aggressive. Just no. It's okay. I don't need it. No. It's okay. You got to come in strong on that close. And if you spent that whole day trying to memorize 16 different responses to different objections, you're not going to be there and ready for the times that it actually matters. I'm say boredom and fear are the two biggest ones.
How was it? What was it? It was some concert, I remember. Oh, it was One Republic. And I was like, I wonder how many times he's saying this banger. You know what I mean? Like everybody, it's like too late to apologize. Like you just like, you have the banger, right? And it's like, I'm over here. That dude sings this 100 times a year for 10 years straight. You know what I mean? And it's like, he has to nail the same tone, the same thing as if it was the first time we heard it on the radio. But you gotta know, like, that's his 100th time that year singing it. You know what I mean? And it's like, he's bored singing the same song, but it works. It gets the crowd moving. It gets the engagement. And if he was like, hey guys, I wrote this new song today, it would probably be a good song, but none of us, like the engagement of the crowd would be so low. And I think it kind of goes in the same concept of like, if you have a banger pitch that you know is going to work, you have to sing it as if like that crowd is the first time they get to hear that every time. But you don't know that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does. And there's that, you embrace the nuance of the situation, right? So if you're getting bored with, I got to repeat this exact same pitch over and over and over again, right? You just start to figure out like every little tonal aspect of each one of those words and see the delivery based off of that. And you can learn to kind of embrace the suck of the situation. Right.
I like that.
Right. Because Jordan Belfort talks about this a lot when he brings up that every great speech you've ever heard was scripted. All of them. Right. In the movie Braveheart, when Mel Gibson's on that horse and he's screaming to everyone, right? One, no one could actually hear him from that far away. But two, if he just tried to make up or improvise his script at that point, right, it wouldn't have been nearly as powerful. So remembering your pitch is like having a shield with you so that whenever they try to come out with any responses, you're protected.
100%. So what do you find after training and being in this for 8 years? You know, everybody was asked like the secret, salesman's formula of their day. And you've obviously been around a lot of performers. What do you find the top 3 characteristics of these Golden Door winners, the guys that are thrown down? Like, what are they doing differently that you're finding than kind of the average guy?
That's a great question. One of the things you'll find often is that with top performers, they're really great to be around. It's this funny thing when you start to succeed in solar and you see people doing really well, there's a part of your head that's really competitive. It's like, no, I'm sure that guy's like a douche in person. Every single top performer you meet is an awesome person to hang out with. You literally just start saying, you know, I'm glad he's succeeding. I get it, right? Of course I would say yes to that person, right? They're generally pretty optimistic and level-headed. Optimistic, level-headed, consistent. There's no like specific thing. There's no perfect little part of their pitch that they're using. There's just an ennui about that person that you notice. And you'll find this consistently. If you meet Mike Brand and Ashton Buswell, two different guys somewhere on the back end, a lot of similarities in their cadence and their tonality and their way of just being, right? There's some newer guys who are a little different, like the Ricardo Ricci type, who's like a former, soccer player and is kind of like mystical in his ways, right? But at the same time, just staying determined, staying hungry, being consistent, and just being as positive as you can be in every interaction is going to lead to so many more sales than becoming resentful or overly reserved about delivering information. One of the things when we started Real Sales Dynamics that got brought up to us is, dude, you're giving away everything. Like I'm not. I'm just videotaping it. You can't even necessarily use exactly what I'm saying unless you're kind of trained to know what it is anyway. So just give it away. Give away everything. I've filmed hundreds of closes, pitches, right? The good, the very bad, and the horrendously ugly. And I do it all in kind of a humorous way, right? I don't try to take anything too seriously. And the last thing we're ever trying to do is to make door knocking look like a Nike ad. We're not trying to bring in those kind of guys.
Yeah. No, and I think you rewind 10 years ago and door-to-door had no really online presence. You know what I mean? It was like kind of forbidden to post. Most companies, especially the big box companies, wouldn't even let you post. Just for legal reasons. And I, it's now kind of started to spread online as far as Instagram or YouTube or whatnot. What do you think that's done, good or bad, from the publicity on a consumer or a business side of things? I'm curious your intake, you know what I mean, on that.
Yeah, on the consumer side of things, I do hope, for instance, that customers don't necessarily like research our videos. Not because we're saying anything wrong. It's just because at the tail end, I'm like, and I made $12,000 commission on that deal, right? So all of our stuff for Real Sales Dynamics is about rep facing, not customer facing, right? We're not going to send a customer, hey, this is me, bagging up 5 deals in a day, right? That's not going to make the customer feel great. At the same time, I'm not really worried about it. Listen, I have 37,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's great. That's awesome. I'm really happy about that. That's like the biggest solar door knocking channel. You're the biggest door knocking channel. Good job. But it's a small little thing, right? Of people. That's basically more than every door knocker there is probably in the United States. So I'm really not too concerned from that end. And if anything, I think it's good because you're going to get called out if you have BS pitches, right? One of the things I really like and that I hold on to is that when I go meet up with installers and they're worried, oh, well, you put up 18 deals last week. What did you say? I'm like, here's what I said. Like, here's the actual entire interaction so that you know that I didn't promise a tax credit where there wasn't or whatever happened with that. And is keeping reps a bit more honest, as long as they have at least a couple long form videos to where you can kind of break it down.
Love that. Yeah, because I always think like that's people's biggest concern is like, hey, we're exposing, here's the back end. And I've gotten a lot of flack from either public or big company or, just even like reps will be like, oh, you said this. I'm like, dude, you're taking this out of context, which it could be, right? You could take a section or a clip or a soundbite and you're like, yeah, that could be construed as. But I hope like people realize like the whole purpose of us putting things out there is to then show people you can do it the right way, the highest level, and ethically sell. And guess what? You should make 12 grand on a deal. You should make good money. You should, you know what I mean? It's like any company, any business, I don't care if you're selling phone cases or you're selling cars or you're selling whatever, it's companies need the marketing. And it's like, instead of spending dollars on, billboards, you think of like Ken Garf or some big car dealership. It's like they're spending hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars on advertising. You're taking away the advertising. you are the advertising and the sales commission, you're getting paid a lot. Like businesses, that's what it takes. But I think consumers obviously are like frustrated when they're like, wow, that's what I make in a month. But it's like, cool, you could come do this. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
come try what we do. And I remember I'm out at this couples retreat last week, and I was with Dan Martell and a bunch of people, and they're high vibe in Hawaii. And a girl comes up to me and she's like, you do door-to-door sales? And she's like, I could never do that. And she just like goes off for like 15 minutes on like, no way, you knock doors. You know what I mean? Like not like a downplay, but just like there's no way I could do that. And it like helped me kind of understand, like, and she does coaching and all this other cool business stuff. And I was like, yeah, there's a lot of people that just downright wouldn't do this job. And it's like, because it's a hard job. And I think that people get frustrated sometimes when they see how much money a door-to-door guy could make or not make. And I'm over here like, there's this huge, almost like a impoverished country. It's like tons in the poverty section. And then you have like a really small, like really rich group. You know what I mean? Like you think of like, and it's not that we're pillaging and using and enslaving anyone. It's just I think a lot of people don't realize like the door is open to enter into the very wealthy category of door-to-door people. You know, you've made millions of dollars over the last 8 years, and that's not like exclusive just to you, right? Like there's not like hey, you had to get X master's degree and X timeline and X industry. Like it's any industry, any group, you know, this is possible. I just think the problem is that the vast majority of broke door-to-door sales reps kind of convolute this like pool of, should I do this or am I ever going to be successful? And it's like, why do we put content out there is to kind of give inspiration and hope to like, no, there are people being successful and you could just as easily jump into that category. So I hope like people listening to that, like realize that's a big reason why Carlos and Johnny and myself try to put stuff out there is just like, here's an invitation, go use what we can and find success. I don't know if you'd agree with that same concept.
No, I and you know, the 80-20 principle absolutely exists within the solar space, just like it exists everywhere, right? The Pareto principle, where it's, you know, 20% of the people are netting a good amount of the total profit. But that level of meritocracy is the fairest way for things to work, right? And it's a fascinating thing where, yes, you know, in an office, there could be one guy who made $200,000 that month, and there's another guy who may have made $0 that month. And so the loser mentality, excuse the French, but loser mentality is like, oh, well, that guy's taking away from that guy. It's like, no, we actually create wealth. If you want more evidence of that, take a look at what happened when Elon Musk basically took over Solar City, fired all the reps, and they went from 42% of market share down to 1% of market share by firing all the door-to-door sales reps because Elon Musk thought we can do this all via marketing online, right? And they've never gotten above 1% during that entire time. The richest, smartest person in the entire world couldn't figure it out from a marketing wing. He needed door knockers in order to carry out solar door-to-door to make it make sense. And in any industry in which you have a first generation sales product, in our case, it's solar, but in the past it was literally things like cars, like the Ford Motor Company sold door-to-door cars, right? Cable, alarms, pest control, cell phones, right? All of these things started off with one crazy guy who ignores everything that everyone else says and goes out and knocks doors, makes the most amount of money, right? Because they're able to do something that no one either can do or is willing to do.
100%.
That's a beautiful thing.
It's so beautiful. Hence why I wrote a book. I'm going to add this. I'm adding this to your top 3. You got to read it in order for you to, you know, but Eat What You Kill, I wrote it for that whole premise of just like the guy that's willing to go be the carnivore is going to be the guy that's going to go create more wealth than the guys that are waiting for wealth to come. You know what I mean? And anyway, so I want to add that to your top. I promise you, if you read that, you'll be like,
Okay,
it smashes any door-to-door book out there. It's not even just door-to-door, but it's a very good sales manifesto, because I felt like the world needed a more so clear, concise, from the psychology of selling to the mindset that it takes to really go be successful. So I put it in 300 pages for you. But we got to wrap. Any last advice for just any general door-to-door people that are out there, like, just your words, the words of wisdom from the Mr. Morales?
Lastly, outside of jumping on a blitz, if you're lacking that motivation to do great, you can find us flblitz.com or njblitz.com. You can find that there. What I want to key in for people is just discipline matters more than motivation. Do not wait to go knock a door once you get into the right mental space, right? That mental space that you're craving, that you want, that drive to go knock more doors, is a result of actually doing the thing, right? Execute first and then have the emotional fun afterwards. So if you're right now listening to this, instead of knocking the doors in at 3 p.m., I'm telling you to click pause. We'll still be here. We'll still be here right afterwards. Go start knocking those doors. Hit at least 100 doors a day, especially in your first 6 months, and you're going to succeed.
Love that. Love that. Well, I appreciate what you're doing for the industry, Carlos. Appreciate, all the videos and all the love. And so, guys, all the love. Listen to this. Go re-listen to it. Share it with somebody that you know. And if you haven't subscribed to the DD podcast yet, hit subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you, man.